It was a great trip, travelling from Darwin all the way down under to Perth by road during September and October 2001. Travelling via the Kimberleys, Broome and the Pilbara, it was almost 8,000 kilometres. Far too much for one video, so part 1 covers the first 9 days travelling from Darwin to Broome. In part 2 we will travel almost 5,000 kilometres from Broome via the Pilbara to Perth. Over 10 wonderful days. So, let's go.
All going well. We've got something just over 600 kilometres to travel today. Not a great deal to see other than we'll go into Kalbari National Park, as I said, and see the Murchison River, the gorge there, some wildflowers to see. No doubt Carol will find them, I feel she will. And about 4 o'clock, all going well, into Geraldton. Quick drive around town, all going well, 4:30 into our motel.
We are now entering Kalbari National Park and everybody's expectantly on the lookout for wildflowers, wonderful Western Australian spring wildflowers. And suddenly, here they are. The varieties of wildflowers were just beyond belief. There were tiny individual flowers, plus there were everlasting daisies in wonderfully brilliant colours, growing in the coarsest red sand imaginable. One wonders how they would get the moisture to survive. There were many different grevilleas. One had a creamy white bark and was called lamb's tail. But let's drive on and see some of the other flowers further into Kalbari National Park. Surprisingly, there were odd pockets of land that looked as though they had been cleared. We came across a rather tall shrub lining each side of the road, which is a fluffy grevillea, or called sometimes old socks grevillea, for obvious reasons.
Probably make a stop somewhere around here. We'll just find a good spot.
5 minutes now.
It was a very handsome grevillea, but I must admit it did have a slightly musty odour. Another beautiful wildflower, but I don't know its name. And surely Banksias must be amongst the most spectacular native shrubs of all. So many different variations on the theme. Western Australia is indeed fortunate to have such a wonderful variety of wildflowers, and has a justly earned reputation as one of the most spectacular places on earth to see wildflowers in springtime. This one is dramatic but beautiful. This one a brilliant red. And Stenya has found this smoke bush to be the perfect subject for her camera. While Carol trains her camera on different varieties of grevillea. Nature's subtle differences are endless. On the road again to Hawk's Head Lookout to see the Murchison River. It was a well-formed track to the lookout overlooking the Murchison River gorge, but although quite windy, those pesky flies were still annoying us. Western Australia doesn't have many significant rivers, and while it was a pleasant view down into the Murchison gorge, and the river was quite pleasant to look at, you could hardly call it spectacular. The only sign of wildlife I could see was the solitary waterbird landing on the river and heading towards that rock. Looking the other way, the Murchison Gorge towards the west was even less rugged, and the river really quiet and very placid. Heading back to the coach, Doug produced his secret weapon to deter the flies. A battery-powered fan. Doug's smile shows that it really worked for him, while the rest of us just used the well-rehearsed Australian salute. Back near the coach, the wildflowers were once again in profusion. Just look at the delicate structure of these blossoms. and these tiny yellow pea flowers growing on the ground. And how about these wonderful yellow blossoms with the delicate brown centre? The variety in the wildflowers were quite astonishing, but it was very difficult to capture close-up shots because of the high wind which kept the flowers bouncing around and unable to focus clearly on them. Here, two different blossoms appear to be flowering on the one bush. Brilliant reds, yellows and blues. There seemed to be absolutely no end to the variety. And of course all around us was the now familiar old socks grevillea. And heading south down the highway, it continued to straddle us for many kilometres.
Here into these wheat bins on your right hand side, and there's also temporary bin here in the front. Finally settled in about 1920. It's a historic town these days, population about 1,000. And there's 3 pubs in town. The top pub, the middle pub and the bottom pub.
Quite a large town, population just over 25,000 people. Very popular place for tourists heading out of the cooler weather of Perth. On average here they have 8 hours of sun a day.
That big flat thing straight in front of us is one of the largest wheat bins. There's a big ship waiting to possibly come in. Outside they get themselves all ready. You'll see on there they've got LFBG.
Or licensed fishing boat Geraldton.
Another month and they'll all the big cray boats that are in dry dock at the moment, they'll all be out. They'll have had their blessing of the fleet, where the bishop comes across or up to Geraldton. They have the big celebrations, etc., and away they go. They're gone. 3, 4, 5 months at a time.
How do they catch them?
They in pots, in cray pots. I'll see if I can see somewhere to show you what they look like, with big holes and everything through it. But the crayfish can't get out. There's a big hole in the top, and they put a bait in the bottom of this cage. And I might be able to show you some tomorrow when we go through Dongra. Make sure we go past some where we can show you that they've got them in the backyard. Actually, even Cervantes might as well.
In Francis Street, and I just saw Francis Street. Oh, you should have told me.
We'll go on a tour past it.
Go round there.
After a great overnight stay at a local motel and a wonderful seafood dinner, we headed out next morning towards Perth, through wheat fields, and we're now well and truly into the West Australian wheat belt, a very productive part of the Australian grain industry.
Of Dongra. If anything happens at Dongra, this is where it is. Old hotel coming up on your right hand side. Little post office, news agents, etc. That's the thriving metropolis of. Oh, gee, they're going to put a roundabout in here as well. This is getting a bit flash. See where some of the trees are just been tossed around a bit. Not too sure what those new buildings are there. We've been watching it develop, but the new jetty is being built there on the right. Nice sheltered bay area to keep the fishing fleet in, and the recreational boats also. See that part of the reef is also out of the water here to the left. That's why you don't get very big waves, and of course the rest of the reef does go further out. As you'd say, it does go up to 60 kilometres out from the edge here. The big waves can't break over the coral reefs.
Donga's industries include the treatment of natural gas and condensate from local oil fields and mineral sands mining and beneficiation.
I'll follow the coastal drive through part of Darwin Bay.
Lehman was established in 1958 and by 1999 had a population of about 700, involved in crayfishing, tourism and in mine housing for the nearby mine. Abram Lehman was an English navigator working for the Dutch company VOC. When the Gilt Dragon went missing, he was first officer and navigator on the Watchman Boy, one of two ships sent to look for survivors. On the 22nd of March 1658, Lehman and 13 crew went ashore near Lancelin in a 9-metre open boat to look for survivors. A storm blew up and they were unable to return to their ship. On the 28th of March, realising that they had been abandoned, they set about sailing back to Batavia, now Jakarta, a journey of about 2,000 miles or 3,300 kilometres in a rowboat. They began to prepare and on the 8th of April started the epic voyage. 3 weeks later, Lehman and 10 crewmen made it to Java, where 7 crew deserted. Lehman and the remaining crew were captured and did not get back to Batavia until the 23rd of September 1658. In 1961 the town was renamed in honour of this courageous man, and the map sea journey showing the course of the Watchman Boy and the course sailed by Lehman to Java in the open boat was painted as a townscape project in 1999, along with this imaginative painting on the side of the town to Minty's block, showing in ghostly fashion the open boat being rowed all that way to Java by Lehman way back in 1868. One of the epic maritime survivor journeys of all time, and 100 years before Captain Cook set foot in Australia. But it's time to go. The rich white sands of nearby Eneabba have long been mined as a source of high-grade rutile and zircon. Hugging the coast, we turn west again towards Cervantes and the Pinnacle.
Well, have a look on your left where it says Nambung National Park. Bay to your right hand side and a little coastal township of Grey out to your right.
Welcome to the Pinnacles Desert, a fascinating part of the 17,000 hectare Nambung National Park. Once again we are surrounded by an abundance of wildflowers. Most of them, of course, I don't recognise, but I did see oak-leaved dryandras and cotton tops amongst many others. The spread and variety of the West Australian spring wildflowers is truly amazing. In fact, we have had them with us now for several days, covering many hundreds of kilometres, and I suspect we will continue to see them for many more hundreds of kilometres. But looking beyond the wildflowers, there are the amazing pinnacle structures arising from the sand dunes of the Nambung National Park. Cutting a long story short, these limestone pillars were caused by rainwater leaching the lime from weathered seashell beaches below the sand dunes. A layer of hard calcrete formed over the softer limestone below, but cracks in this layer allowed plant roots to penetrate and more rain to widen the cracks, and the prevalent strong wind of the area eroded the sand dune to expose these pillars. More of those pesky flies. It was a fascinating visit to the Pinnacle Desert, but we're now on our way south towards Perth. And we're now into sheep farming country. Now onto the Brand Highway leading us to the North Coast Highway to Perth. 192 kilometres to go. We pass a huge bushfire between us and the coast. Destructive bushfires are a fact of life in Australia. More sheep, the first serious traffic we have encountered since leaving far distant Darwin. Only 54 kilometres to Perth. Now we're in dairy cattle country too. As we enter the fertile Swan Valley, we start to see some of the far-famed vineyards of Western Australia. At last, our first glimpse of the city skyline. Across Perth's Swan River and into the CBD. Through the smart restaurant precinct of Northbridge, we then trek along the Perth to Fremantle railway line, which runs east-west on the fringe of the CBD. Over the railway line, across the CBD and down to the Swan River. Along the Swan River Broadwater, into the hotel belt, well situated on the eastern fringe of the CBD is our very pleasant hotel, the Saville Park Suites. From the balcony of our delightful suite, we have a fine view of the Swan River on a quiet Sunday late afternoon. Here we are at our destination, at the end of a 7,000 kilometre odyssey, all the way from far distant Darwin. It had been a wonderful trip. Early next morning it was a quick drive through the city centre to wonderful Kings Park on the other fringe of the CBD. Perth is a very recent and very compact city, and for a major city it is the most remote city in the world, being closer to Singapore than it is to Sydney.
From here, then over to Langley on the left, the Saville Park Suites. And Adelaide Terrace will follow that. It does a funny dog leg up in front of us there, and that's when it becomes St George's Terrace. And when we do get up to the lights here on the right hand, at the lights ahead, on your right hand side you might be able to see a statue. That's the statue of John Septimus Roe. He's the Surveyor General here of Perth, or he was in the very early years. He's under the palm tree over there to your right. And he's the one who mapped out where all the streets were going to be. Perth Concert Hall here on your left hand side. and Government House also coming up. Of notable West Australians from the very early years onwards up until the late. There's another one there on your left, 1831. There's another one somewhere, 1832. So that was 1979. And Rolf Harris is also mentioned in them somewhere. But you've got to go through the years, and you'll find that also on the right hand side on the ground. On your left hand side coming up, you'll see some bronze kangaroos. You'll see one having a drink of water. You'll also see an old drill piece. And up that drill piece is all the different minerals that are mined here in Western Australia. Street across to your right hand side, and the second street up also, Hay Street and Murray Street. London Court Shopping on your right hand side, St George and the Dragon. Lovely church coming up here on your right hand side, the Trinity. Sorry, the Uniting Church in Australia here on your right. That is where Bob Hawke married Hazel, part of Bank West also. If you get a chance to go inside that one, have a look at the ceilings in there. They tell me there's gold plating. Then the second school was built over here to our front right hand side of the cloisters. They have a Moreton Bay fig tree on your right hand side, in between number 190 St George's Terrace and the cloisters, which is that other brick building with the little arches. And on the very hot days here in Perth, the fire brigade is on duty to come and water that fig tree. On the black pole on the diagonal front right hand side, you'll see a black crow sitting on a bird cage with an elephant in it. And on your left hand side here, you've got kangaroos with briefcases hopping home. Just to confuse you. Bit of street art. The kangaroos with their briefcases are to remind us that this used to be a big forest area, and that the kangaroos, and of course their briefcases, are the fact that they're business kangaroos hopping home, because this is the business area of Perth. Coming up to your right hand side is Parliament House, just crossing over the Mitchell Freeway. Parliament House over there, those funny little bird boxes up on the side, they are fountains, and when they're flowing, the locals say that we're crying again, because they say that's the taxpayers' tears. Government's been playing up again. That's what the local story is. That's what I've heard anyway. We've got lots of flags coming up here in front of us, and we're about to enter Kings Park, everyone. Quite large acreage in through there. In the early years they decided that certain part of Perth was to remain as it is naturally, and Sir John Forrest was one of those early pioneers that started that off, and John Septimus Rowe and various other people also. Avenue of Honour here, lemon-scented gums on your left and right hand side. Underneath you got the plaques to do with the history of WA. At night all these trees are lit up, and you can see them from a fair distance away. All different colours of yellows and blues and reds and greens and pinks and everything, especially around Christmas time. Beautiful sight up here. Okay, we're going to be leaving from here at 9 o'clock. My watch at the moment says 26 minutes past 8. We leave here at 9 because we have to make our way down to the jetties down there to the left. You can see the bell tower from up here too. We've got to go down to those jetties there because at 9:15 we have to be boarding our boat. He wants to get a cup of tea or coffee, but they're fixing up area here. Mount Eliza War Memorial on our left hand side here. You've also got the Eternal Flame. Yes, it's going beautifully. And this is the Whispering Wall. If one of you sits on one side, one sits on the other side, and you whisper along that wall, the person at the other side can hear it. And the red and green kangaroo paw, the floral emblem of WA. Over there to the left where that little tractor was, they did have the wildflower show there. Big tents there. Yep, we're just going to go in here and park in the car park there. Find a spot to let you off.
Kings Park comprises a huge area of totally unspoilt bushland to the back, but up front on the cliff edge, the wildflowers are absolutely wonderful, with masses of yellow and green and red kangaroo paws, and a wonderful display of the many varieties of the quite unique Geraldton wax plant, with delicate waxy blooms through a wide range of colours from pale pink through to deep red. Undoubtedly the standout performer is the national emblem of Western Australia, the spectacular green and red kangaroo paw. It just has to be the state's most widely photographed wildflower, but of course there are so many different variations in colour arising from natural transmutations and cultivated hybrids that you can almost pick any colour you want, and there is a wide variety of these on display in Kings Park. And really spectacular is this unique member of the Downunder family. And of course masses of white, yellow and pink everlastings. These are marvellous flowers in the springtime in Western Australia. Huge tracts of countryside, open woodlands, forest between trees almost everywhere. The countryside is just a carpet of these wonderful daisies. Photographic filmmakers must love them. And where could you hope to see them better than in this magnificent Kings Park overlooking the spectacular Perth skyline? Kings Park also has a splendid display of bottle trees unique to South Africa and Western Australia. We first saw these of course way up in the north when we started our journey near Derby, but it's now time to head back down into town and to the waterfront to catch our ferry downriver to Fremantle, the deep water port essential to Perth, at the mouth of the languid and shallow Swan River.
Okay, even if you just want to go up and have a look at it when we get off at Fremantle, you can do so. You don't have to purchase it. There's just a little thing that they do. It's a nice little memento of your tour if you wish it. Some sort, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, you'll have to go up to the bar to purchase it. They do commentary all the way to Freo. 1629, so 400-year-old piece of history, and you can actually touch it. When the Batavia was rebuilt, or when a new Batavia was built, it was built in Holland I think, they actually came to Australia to have a look at that piece that's in the Maritime Museum to see how it was built back in those days, because they didn't have any written plans about it. One. Buildings over on the other side are South Perth. If you want to go to the zoo, you can catch a boat. If you need toilets, they're usually downstairs from the deck that you get in on. So we'll check it out. But all sorts of other ones. We're on Captain Cook Cruises.
Aboard the James Sterling craft up to the cruise for our tour of the Swan River, Fremantle Harbour. What a beautiful day, isn't it? Just magnificent. Fantastic conditions to be out and about on the water, and we'd just like to welcome you along. My name is Mel, I'm the skipper, and your crew this morning, our host.
We got a wonderful view of the Perth city skyline as we headed west towards the bridge which carries the Mitchell Freeway over the narrowest part of the Swan River.
Please don't hesitate to see the crew or myself, and we'll do our best to help you out. Now you're more than welcome to move about the boat. It's a beautiful, beautiful big ferry, so do take advantage of all the deck space. If you need the toilets, they're situated down below on the very bottom deck on either side of the boat, and they can be used at any time throughout the tour. If you are moving around, if I can ask you just to start with, just keep an eye out for the crew, because we're going to start the trip off with a cup of tea and coffee. There's no charge for the morning tea. The first round of hot drinks we're going to bring to your tables, and then after that we'll start up the bar. And if you'd like a refreshment, we've got full bar facilities on board. We have a very good range of beers, wines, soft drinks and spirits, and the bar's open right throughout the tour. Now the itinerary this morning, we'll be cruising down to Fremantle, and we'll have 2 stops. And our first stop in the morning is at 11 o'clock. All over the world, and all over Australia. I've got a young lady with me here from Victoria, and I know we've got some people on board from New South Wales.
The wind and water noise totally drowns out the skipper's commentary, which is excellent, and I'll turn the sound down except when the commentary is so good you simply must hear it.
State War Monument, just above us to the right at the top of the mountain. I must tell you about the place on the right hand side. This is the old brewery.
This is the famous old Swan Brewery, the first in Western Australia. It has been revamped to provide upmarket accommodation and resort dining on the waterfront. The ocean port of Fremantle is some 25 kilometres southwest down the Swan River from Perth, so the vessel must move quite rapidly at times to make the distance. This is the highly regarded Royal Perth Yacht Club, from which Alan Bond, through his Yanchep Yacht Club, mounted the bid which wrested the America's Cup for the first time from America to bring it to Australia. Many Perth youngsters train really hard to become good sailors and hope one day to maybe become another America's Cup winner, just so long as their name isn't Alan Bond this time around. At its broadest point, the Swan River becomes more than 3 kilometres wide, but sadly the river is quite shallow for most of its distance and cannot take any really deep draft vessels. This is the popular suburban Dalkeith Yacht Club. Dalkeith is one of the oldest and somewhat upmarket dormitory suburbs of Perth. Starting in older settled suburbs like Dalkeith, the 1980s saw a flood of money coming from mining and other entrepreneurial ventures during the boom times in Western Australia in the 1980s, which led to them building large and really substantial homes along the Swan River foreshores. As the excellent commentary of our skipper says, it was a crazy time, and there was just so much entrepreneurial money around from the mining boom and other activities in Western Australia during that crazy period that they absolutely splurged the money on some of the most amazing structures along the river foreshores.
Big indoor swimming pool, 8 bathrooms. So what cost $18 million to build in 1985, sold at the end of 1999 for $9 million. Mr. New was the original owner of Midland Brick, Midland Brick, the biggest brick manufacturers in the world, hence the great big clay brick foundation. Not seen a big white mansion coming in on the right with the dome-shaped atrium and the tennis court and all the palm trees. This one was built by Michael Edgley. He's the same entrepreneur, and it was owned by Alistair Norwood, who was the head of the James West stores across the nation. It's their holiday house in Perth. Unreal, holiday house.
This home is owned by Perth entrepreneur Michael Gear, who suddenly found that last year his wealth from the mining boom had plummeted to a mere $875 million.
Full rags to riches story, that guy Kerry Stokes. The Western Australian newspaper did a profile on him, and he was an orphan. If you have a close look, there's actually a newer home in front of the old place, and that's where she lives. For those who know the story, the Hancock story, that old mansion there, that's where Rose started working, Rose Hancock started working as a housekeeper for her.
Many of the homes along the Swan River are relatively modest, but As one gets further downriver towards Pepman Grove, the extravagant excesses of the mining boom, with the money awash from these entrepreneurial schemes, and many of them frankly quite dodgy, was suddenly ploughed into these really extravagant homes where hardly say that they were tasteful. Anyhow, as you'll see, you could make up your own mind on that.
That creamy coloured mansion back there, right above the limestone foundation, that was built by Kimberley. He's the chap who raced the Kookaburra boats, which defended the America's Cup Series during 1987. And I thought we'd venture down here because so many people still ask me about Alan Bond, where he used to live. See the three-storey Mediterranean style place to the right, with the dark brown roof. Some people say it looks a bit like a Pizza Hut. That's where Bondi lived up until December of 1993. And then, how's this for extravagance? The Bond family sold it to a gold mining magnate, his name Ross Atkins. And he spent $10 million on renovations, so I can't see where from here. And it's funny, you talk to some people here in Perth, they still have a soft spot for Bondi, but there's a lot of people that don't, of course, the people that lost their life savings, and people were writing letters to the editor of the West Australian saying it's a joke for every day spent in prison. It represents $1 million worth of fraud.
As the skipper says in his commentary, it is an interesting area because the median price of the average home in Pepman Grove is 1.2 million Australian dollars.
Grove being 1.2 million. And see that Tuscany style place above the line.
But this one is obviously worth a lot more.
It's owned by the Club family.
And how about this as a safe mooring for your boat?
Must have a few props. See what he's done here. He's built a new home for himself and his wife, and one for each of his daughters. So there are 3 houses here that he built for his family. And there she lives, ladies and gentlemen, way up above us on the hill, the big white mansion with the green roof and the 4 white chimneys. I think we better have a drum roll for this one. The big guy with the wind style place. That is owned by the sensuous, sumptuous, vivacious, voluptuous, the one and only Rose Hancock Porteous lives way up on the hill there. It's a pretty impressive mansion in Wannabe too. It cost $32 million to complete. It boasts river and city views, ocean views. It has 11 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and within the grounds there's a $4 million guest house, and she calls the property Prix d'Amour. Oh, there's the guest house, see the one with the orange tile roof at the top? She calls the place Prix d'Amour, which in French means prize of love. You hear about this woman all the time in the media. She came here from the Philippines and started working as a housekeeper for Lang Hancock, and he was the richest mining man in Australia. Well, she didn't keep the house for too long. She married the old boy promptly, and would have been at least 40 years his junior. He died back in 1992, and now Rosie just lives the life up there. I don't know anyone else in the whole world that could do it, but Rose did. He was having a birthday, and she gave him this huge birthday party, and it was such a big party that the media all came along. And there's the television news cameras, and there she was in front of a national audience, and as a present to her husband, she gave him a mannequin of herself. This one's also associated to Hancock Mining. It's being built by Angela Bennett, that's Lang Hancock's business partner's daughter. It's going to cost about $12 million to complete, and above it to the right it's got its own gatehouse and guest house. I thought, crikey, that must be for staff, but I was reading an article in the paper, and apparently Angela has 6 children, and they're all globetrotters. So she built a gatehouse there for a base for the kids when they come back to Perth. So Dallas Dempster, he was the head of the syndicate that built Burswood. The place just above it, that's my favourite one. I like that. It's not too ostentatious. It's modern, and it's just taking total advantage of its views. Do you like that? So it's 8 months from Kimberley Point to the port of Fremantle.
This is typical of the idyllic lifestyle, so keenly sought by most Perth people.
Mr. Sarich was the inventor of the orbital engine, but these days a very successful property developer. And then to the left-hand side.
On the shoreline approaching Fremantle, a successful developer is developing what has to be one of the ugliest developments of brick and mortar one could ever imagine. Just look at this absolute excrescence on the hillside. Perhaps he tried to copy the Romans, or the Greeks, or the Egyptians. but he sure has a steep learning curve ahead of him. And while these are obviously quite adequate homes, one could hardly say that they are architecturally significant. It really is quite sad. This architectural hodgepodge will forever blight the northern shore at the mouth of the Swan River, and being a rather barren, bleak and windswept area, it is unlikely that significant tree growth behind those buildings could hide some of the ugliness. So I guess the area has been spoilt for all time. Well, we're nearly there. Fremantle is just around the bend ahead. This is the only other bridge across the Swan downstream from Perth, and beyond are the heavy lifting cranes of the deep sea ocean port.
Alrighty, for our Fremantle passengers, there we go. Please do mind your head and step as you're disembarking. Have a good day.
And Gary awaits with the coach to take us back to Perth.
Well, it's coming up on your right hand side, this long creamy coloured building.
But first, a look around Fremantle.
Is it World of Energy coming up on your left hand side, down Parry Street? We're going to go down there. In front you've got the Fremantle markets. We're going to try and go to our left, down to the other traffic lights. As we cross this road, because we're going to go straight down this particular street. Okay, on your left hand side you'll be able to see a tall building, brown building. Must be coming down Norfolk Street. We're going to turn left at Norfolk Street. There's an orange cat in front of us. Okay, that's a free bus. That's what you see, those funny little cats on your maps. That's the way the bus goes with that station. We're around the harbour area for a short bit and show you various things. The replica of the Endeavour was built in this building here, coming up on your left hand side. The railway line that we've just crossed, that now has goods rail on it, but when the America's Cup was on, that sort of thing, that certainly was used for passenger rail. You're now in Fishing Boat Harbour. With any amount of seafood you want, this is the place to come and get it. We're just going to follow the harbour round to our left as the road goes. Cicerello's, very big place. Sales, Fisherman's Kitchen, more seafood restaurants. Over on your right you got the Maritime Museum, but we'll get closer to that afterwards. Chunnagun, Japanese steak and seafood restaurants as well. Yep. One of the boats on your right hand side coming back from Rottnest Island. We're just going to make our way straight up here a little bit. Kalis. Remember we had Kalises up at, where were we? Exmouth. Yeah, the prawns, the crayfish, the pearling, the whole lot. Seeking Fisheries Receival Depot, that's where they receive all sorts of the seafoods, plus all the other places in through here. Here's where the crayfishing boats come in, and all the other big fishing boats also come in here and drop all their fish off, etc., be processed. The Dovkin, a little Dutch ship, was also put in the water around this area. He was the first pilot ship to come around to Australia in 1606. The replica was built here, and it's now on its way back to Holland, I believe. Just a little circuit there. There's a little bit of accommodation out there to the left-hand side. We can't go out that far anymore. We've got cars parked in all sorts of weird and wonderful places. MG Kalis have been here for so long now, I think you're probably on the 3rd or 4th generation looking after it. And I don't think they speak Italian much anymore. Funny looking building you can see being built over to the left hand side, and you might just be able to make out the top part of a submarine over there. That is the brand new Maritime Museum being built. That's where all the cranes are. I can see what do they call it, the tower?
This is basically the
long the vehicle's going to take to get you good coverage around.
It's the same as what we've done.
Is it?
Yeah, so far.
Okay. All the anchors here on your left-hand side to various ships that were wrecked over the years. We're just going to make our way back up a little bit, seeing as it's the only way to get out. That's right, we go back up the same road.
Yes.
Zanzibar, Little Creatures Brewing. Very nice, isn't it? Yep, I've had lunch there a couple of times. Quite a nice meal. Okay, we're just going to go up Marine Terrace.
What's Grandma doing?
Beautiful hotel on your right hand side, the Esplanade. Had some renovations done to it and extra bits purchased to it. But certainly it's a beautiful hotel there on the right hand side. Nice park also on your left. We're just going to tickle the aerial amongst the Moreton Bay fig trees for a while as we make our way around to the Maritime Museum.
Park to show them that where the buses are.
There's along here too, if they had bedrooms and bathrooms in them, they were all had people from the America's Cup in them. In these buildings here on our right hand side. There's public toilets over here to our left. If you're coming down this way, it's handy to know where they are. We're just going to go around through here. Okay, Maritime Museum coming up in front of you. Okay, so that's where the piece of the Batavia is.
But videoing it is not allowed.
We're just going to go up Cliff Street. So it's well worth it. You don't have to pay to go into the museum unless you want to leave a donation behind, or if you want any books to buy or that sort of thing. It certainly is quite brilliant to go through and have a look through there. Coming up on the next corner is High Street. And if you have a look to the left of High Street, here to our left hand side, you'll notice the Roundhouse, the very first jail here for Fremantle before that big one was built. Go for a wander in through there, small donation to pay for there, but and you also have an old whaling tunnel around there to your left, also underneath the old Roundhouse. Not much left in there, but it certainly is good. Coming up in front here. Okay, if you have a look on your left and right hand sides in the pavement, you'll see a different, sorry, that way. Sorry, you'll see a different line of bricks. You have a look on your right hand side on the ground. You'll see a pinky coloured set of bricks. That shows you the original shoreline here of Fremantle. Disappears into the grass there on the right, but it comes back up again shortly. We're now in Phillimore Street. It'll show up again shortly. Yep, those funny looking bricks down there on the ground, they've shown up again. They've got little blue tiles in them, and that shows you some of the fish, etc. Here, so that shows you the old original shorelines. It shows you from what we are here on their left, etc. is all reclaimed land. Coming up in front, you've got the train station.
E-shed market.
E-shed markets. Anything and everything you want to buy that you didn't think you had, you've got, it's in there. Those markets are open. Anybody wanting to go back to Perth, either before we do or after we do, if you come here to the train station, you can get the train back to Perth. We'll turn right here. Okay, you also have the bus station here. That can also get you back to Perth.
How long is it?
Half an hour drive or ride, either way.
How long does it take here to drive?
About the same. Bit longer, depends on which way we go, but those buses go a bit more direct and the train goes far more direct than what we do. That's a pleasure.
You've had enough of me, thanks very much.
Gary said if you've had enough, thank you. Post office on your right hand side, which is going down Market Street. Okay, we're going to come down, we'll follow it all the way around to where the hospital is, where we're going to drop you off. Okay, coming up, we're going to cross High Street again. If you have a look to your right, you'll find the Roundhouse. If you have a look to the left, you'll find the shopping mall. lots of places to find something to eat and drink and buy and empty the wallets and leave the money behind and take the goods home with you. There's also a tourist bureau down the end of it, etc. Now we're coming on to South Terrace, which is known as Cappuccino Strip. If you don't want a cappuccino, don't stop in this street. Cappuccino, all sorts of different flavours of coffee, you can get it. Left and right hand sides, just have to fight the seagulls for it. You can sit inside or outside. See, this is during the week and look at it. People everywhere. Who's working? Who's at work? There'll be somebody at work. I mean, it's not even 12 o'clock yet. Look, they're already out there having coffees. Miss Maud's. If you're going to go in there, you better wait a while to get fed. It is nice, but you do have to wait a while. If you need public toilets, there are some toilets at this hotel here on the left, the Sail and Anchor, but you actually have to go in that doorway to your left there to come out to use the toilets just there. Fancy that day tour coach being parked there. But anyway, this is where we're going to drop you off when the lights let us go through.
Back in Perth, we just had time for a quick look at Queen's Park, on the other end of the CBD from Kings Park. It was also very close to our hotel and adjoined the WACA, the West Australian Cricket Association ground, where all the hallowed matches were played between England and Australia. It is also a wildlife sanctuary for the myriad water birds who live around the Swan estuary. It had obviously been a good breeding season. The ducklings seem really healthy and are very well behaved. This male Eurasian coot was really working hard to provide the materials for a nest and to properly look after his wife and kids. This pond full of water lilies appeared to be an ideal place to build a nest. But gathering up all the materials and getting them back to Mum was a pretty constant job. She looked really pleased to get his contribution, and then settled back on the nest to look after those eggs. But what we had really come to see was the famous Western Australian black swan, after which the Swan River was named. This nesting pair apparently breed here every year on this special island that the curators have constructed to make sure that the swans are kept safe from predators. The male is enjoying his ablutions and re-oiling his feathers, but he suddenly seemed to think, maybe I'd better get back to Mum and see how things are going. Mum appears to say that everything's okay, and she simply settles back on the eggs quite happily. But Dad keeps a close fatherly watch over his impending family and patrols up and down around his home just to be sure that everything is completely okay. He needs to watch those egg-hungry seagulls, but I feel confident that the successful breeding future of this pair of swans is assured. Queen's Park is also far famed for a superb bronze statue of Peter Pan, copied from the huge bronze statue in London's Kensington Garden. It is one of the few genuine replicas of Sir George Frampton's statue of J.M. Barrie's immortal character, and was presented to the children of Western Australia in 1927 by members and friends of the Rotary Club of Perth. The rabbits are beautifully portrayed, and just have a look at that rapt look on Wendy's face. The children of Perth really love it. But now we've just got time to flit across to the other side of the CBD to have a look at the wild parts of Kings Park, the huge unspoilt bushland area in behind the frontal displays on the cliff edge fronting the city. In amongst the low scrub and tall gum trees growing everywhere, there were masses of these wonderful little wildflowers, some big, some quite large, as you'll see. And everywhere, thriving bushes of the unique but prolific Geraldton wax plant. The delicacy of many of these wonderful waxy blooms is a true joy to behold, and the variety in different colours and the depth of these colours in the many subspecies is quite remarkable. Of course, we expected the bushland to be alive with many of the different varieties of the wonderful Western Australian kangaroo paw, but on reflection we realised that this is the original one, the red and green one, which was growing quite prolifically in the bush, but of course all the other ones we see are actually hybrids that have been developed from this original plant, with a little help over nearly 200 years from the European horticulturists. Strolling through the bushland, we were delighted every now and again to come across a tiny plant that was really exquisite, really soft and furry. And look at the delicate nature of this one. And how about this one? Quite small, but it was far more prolific than the previous two. Other tiny blooms of quite brilliant hue, but we thought the crowning glory were the wonderful West Australian flowering gums. The colour and delicacy of these wonderful gum bottoms were beyond compare. The now politically incorrectly named Black Boy. As we walked back to the front of the park, self-seeded masses of red and yellow kangaroo paws started to appear, along with the mass displays of everlasting daisies, these wonderful flowers that grow in profusion in Western Australia in an amazing variety of colours and forms. The brilliance of colour and the prolific flowering of these two everlasting daisies is almost beyond belief. But sadly, the time has come to leave Kings Park and head back to our hotel. And even more sadly, the time has now come to say farewell to Perth and to our wonderful trip right around the Western Australian coastline, from far distant Darwin to the Kimberleys, to Broome, to the Pilbara, the Coral Coast, Perth and beyond, way to the Southern Ocean. Exploring the magnificent West with our fellow travellers from around the world had been truly wonderful, but now it's time to say au revoir